Good evening and welcome to Book Bites, where we take a little bite out of 3 different books. And today we're looking at middle grade fiction and a little bit of a fantasy. We're going to be looking at The Conjurers. Hunt for the Lost is the second in a series from Brian Anderson. We're going to get a little snippet from 12 Nights by Andrew Zerker. And we're going to get a little snippet from the first of a series from 13 Witches. And it's entitled The Memory Thief by Jody Lynn Anderson. So let's start with The Conjurers. Hunt for the Lost. Are you excited? I'm excited. I'm only going to read a little bit, so hang in there with me and don't leave, okay? Chapter 1. Emma. I'm blind, thought Emma, instinctively rubbing her eyes. She opened and closed them. No difference. This was not good. She detected damp earth, tasting it, crunching it between her teeth. Every breath scratched her throat. She tried calling to the others, but no sound escaped her grime-covered mouth. I'm buried alive! Panic crept through her. What had happened? She remembered Clive Grubian picking her up and carrying her under one enormous arm, his brother Neil under the other, as the Conjurian detention center shook around them. The boy, Savakia, had been behind them, dragging his father. Then Clive had let her fall and collapse on top of her. A second before, a wave of dirt exploded down the corridor, destroying all light and sound. Clive had saved her. If you counted being buried alive as safe, but she couldn't see, she couldn't move. And what about her brother? What about Alex? She'd bluffed her way into this prison to find and rescue Alex, but she hadn't been able to locate him. Had he been locked in one of those cells? Had he been crushed when the earthquake hit? Did that mean Emma had been left completely alone? No family at all? Something grunted and moved above her, and suddenly Emma could breathe more easily. A hand seized her arm and pulled her up through a few inches of loose dirt, and she was standing in the corridor, coughing and gasping. Neil, Clive, she sputtered. I hope they're crushed under the debris, muttered an irritated voice. Savakia's. He coughed. Some help they turned out to be. Neil, Emma called again, ignoring the boy. Sparks flickered before her eyes. Then Neil's face, round as the moon, appeared in front of her, lit by a flame dancing on the tip of his thumb. You're alive, Emma beamed with relief. She barely knew the 2 Grubian brothers, but in the relief of knowing that she was not all alone in the dark, she could have hugged the short, rotund Neil and his gigantic brother Clive, visible now as the flame on Neil's thumb grew bigger and brighter. Clive nodded at Emma and returned to his task. He was industriously stuffing tiny sacks into small cracks in the wooden wall of the prison. Emma looked up and down the corridor, but she could not look far. The ceiling to her right had caved in, blocking the hallway completely. To her left, the passage was choked with dirt. Emma could see no sign of Sergeant Miller or his men, who had been just about to arrest every single one of them. Savakia crouched by his father's limp body. He'd finagled his way into this prison along with Emma in order to rescue his father, but he hadn't told her about his plan. She had thought he'd been here to help her rescue Alex. She'd been wrong. About that, about a lot of things. Here's another illustration. So this is book 2, so you're going to want to read the first one, The Conjurers, The Kiss of the Shadow, which we also have, and then order this one, right? The Conjurers, Hunt for the Lost by Brian Anderson. That's your first bite. Yum, 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 yum. That tasted pretty good. Here is the next book, 13 Witches, Book 1, The Memory Thief. And it's written by Jodi, Jodi, Lynn Anderson. So let's take a little bite out of this one. I'm going to read the prologue. In a stone courtyard at the edge of the woods, a ghost with glowing red eyes floats back and forth past the windows of St. Ignatius Hospital, waiting for a baby to be born. In the decades that he's been haunting this place, the ghost has seen it all: visitors and patients coming and going, the hopeless cases, the lucky people with small complaints. He kept his glowing eyes on the hospital doors in peacetime and during terrible stretches of war. He'd seen more babies born than he could even count. So when cries drift out through the far west window of the maternity ward, and then relieved laughter and another set of cries, the ghost knows exactly what it means. A particularly rare event, a miracle magnified. The other ghosts in the courtyard go about their business as usual, unnoticing, but the ghost with the glowing red eyes floats to the window for a glimpse. Only then something else happens that the ghost does not expect. Something that, in all the years he's haunted the stone courtyards of St. Ignatius, he's never seen. The night, all at once, becomes still. A silence falls over the woods. The dark sky, already moonless, dims. An owl calls to the stars and then goes quiet. A cat consults with a mosquito, eats it, and then scampers off in fear. Leaves whisper to each other in a little lower than before. Sensing an approaching darkness, knowing the signs of the presence of a witch, all the ghosts of St. Ignatius flee, zipping off through walls and into woods, vanishing into the night, all except one who hides and watches. Slowly, two women emerge from the edge of the trees. The first looks sad and mournful, with a forgettable face, and hands that reach through the air as if grasping for something that isn't there. Strange, translucent moths flutter behind her, and a faint cloud of dust, as if she's just stepped out of a closet full of antiques. The other is far more frightening, with empty powder blue eyes, the pupils like pinpricks, smudged all around in dark purple circles. She smiles with a hungry mouthful of sharp teeth. From around her neck dangle pocket watches, too many to count, while the sad, grasping witch flicks a wrist and drifts in through the slowly opening doors, now obscured in a kind of misty haze. The blue-eyed witch waits. The night waits. The animals wait. The air waits. Nurses, doctors, patients coming and going. None of them notice two witches in their midst. The living remain blind to them, as they always are. Finally, silently, the sad witch emerges through the doors, this time with something bulging under her cloak. "Is it done?" the second witch asks, and the meek, empty-looking one nods. "I've laid my curse. The Oaks woman's memories are mine now," she says, moths fluttering out of her sleeves as she speaks. "She won't remember anything, not of us, not of our secrets, not the sight, not even herself." The second witch considers for a moment, her mouth crooked in bitterness. She glances at the ghostly moths fluttering through the air, and then turns her eyes to the lump under her companion's robe. "And this?" she asked. "No one will remember him either." The sad witch waves a hand, and the folds of her cloak part to reveal a baby, hovering in the air just in front of her stomach. She smiles down at him. There's something terribly needy and desperate about the smile. "Strange. The Oakses are always girls," the blue-eyed witch reflects. The grasping witch clearly longs for the baby. She appears to be the kind of witch who longs for everything. "Can I keep him?" she asks. The blue-eyed witch fingers the pocket watch around her neck and looks down at the baby with disgust. Then she waves a hand, and the baby floats across the space between them. He begins to cry as the blue-eyed witch glares at him. I want no more of this family. The last of them comes with me. What will you do with him? The grasping witch asks. The other witch smirks, her eyes blank and endless as a reptile's, and then she gazes in the direction of the sea, though it is too far off to be seen. It's a fine night for sinking to the bottom of the sea, she says, before waving the child toward her into the folds of her own cloak, which close around him like curtains. The two witches look at each other meaningfully, their dark hearts beating a thorny, unsteady rhythm, and then as quickly as they appear, the witches drift into the forest from which they came. That's the prologue, folks. Very interesting. Don't you want to borrow this, 13 Witches? Book number 1, The Memory Thief, written by Jody Lynn Anderson. It's ready for you to borrow. All right, book number 3, off book by some yum, 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 yum. This is called 12 Nights by Andrew Zerker. Let's see what's up with this. Chapter 1, Removals. The sun set at 6 minutes to 4. Kay lay stretched out on the floor, reading the very small print on the back of the newspaper. Her right eye she had squeezed firmly shut. Her left was growing deliriously tired, and the tiny words loomed at her amid a blur of her big sinking lashes. More and more she had to close them both and relax her stiff neck. Understand that. Her stiff cheek. More and more she squinted sidelong up at the world, with her head cocked to the right. But if her game had caused her irritation, she also felt a sense of modest triumph. She had resisted the temptation to look straight at life since the moment she woke up that morning, exactly 8 hours before, according to her watch. Had anyone else asked her why she was still keeping her right eye shut at 13 minutes past 4 in the afternoon of Christmas Eve, when her mother was going frantic and her little sister Eloise was playing jacks by herself in the back room, she wouldn't have known what to say. Keeping her right eye closed was simply something she had to do today, and she was doing it. Just opposite her head, against the wall, leaned a large metal-framed mirror. Her father had promised to hang it above the hearth, but 3 months later it still stood there, neglected and collecting dust. Kay regarded herself with curiosity in its dull glass. At school, the teachers seemed to talk endlessly about character, having it, getting it, showing it, and above all, building it. Kay was sure she had none, or at least none that was visible. She was the person no one ever really noticed. A heavy clump of brown hair lay across the corner of her blank brow. She drew it back, straightening it and tucking its length behind her ear. It didn't make a difference. She searched her own face, letting her gaze linger on her smooth cheek, the simple, mottled bottle green of her eyes, her flat, pink lips, wondering what others saw when they looked at her. What they didn't see. No tears. Her father was still at work, late, as he had been every day this week and every weekend this month, as he had been every month this year down at the laborer's office, away for a fortnight on a dig, disappearing off to libraries or meetings. She couldn't keep track. This morning, Kay's mom had wiped the counters forcefully after breakfast, then promised her girls a bike ride and a trip to the cinema. But when the sun went down hours later, their winter shoes and coats still lay undisturbed by the door, exactly where they had left them the evening before. Kay could hear the telephone ringing, and she knew it would be her father calling. She could hear the empty distance in his voice as he reported his apologies, distant, detached, blank. Just as she was beginning to doze off, her head softly crackling on the open newspaper, her mother burst into the front room, her heels stomping like slippered hammers on the wood boards. "Get your coat on, Kay. We're going out. Get your sister's coat on." 5 minutes later, as they sat in the back of the car, blowing steam in the freezing air and giggling nervously, The two girls still had no idea where they were going or why. As the engine turned over from gear to gear in rhythm with the car's regular surges, their nervousness began to subside. Kay's hand still held the warm ache where her sister had been squeezing it. She put it in her lap. The night outside the window seemed sharp and clear, and most white lights in the houses they passed shone with a direct intensity. Her windows, by contrast, kept fogging up with her breathing. She moved her face around the glass as far as she could reach, but it was no use. As the car jolted through some lights and then curved down the hill, Elle fidgeted with her foot. Their mother barked from the front seat. "Eloise, stop it! We'll be out of the car in 2 minutes." "But I have something in my boot. It's uncomfortable." Kay turned to the window again. She counted the street lamps as they passed, numbering them by their glows on the silvery ground, still frosty from the night before. Her left eye was now growing ridiculously tired, or maybe it was the funny flatness of seeing with just one eye, because in the center of the circle of light cast by every lamp, she could make out a little circular shadow on the ground. Maybe it was just the wisps of foggy breath still clinging to the glass. She was tempted to open her other eye to check, but she thought if she did, and the little dark circles were gone, would that prove that they weren't there, or that they were? Sometimes when you look right at a star, you couldn't see it, but if you squinted or looked away, you could. And stars were there. Otherwise, how would you wish on them? Very interesting. I want more of this book. All 3 books have been delightful. This one was 12 Nights by Andrew Zerker. And don't forget that you can borrow any of these books and so much more through our Library to Go service. Monday through Friday, we're open from 1 to 5. We're open till 6 o'clock on Tuesday nights, and now for Library to Go from 10 a.m. until 12 p.m. on Saturdays. So put your orders in or give us a call, and we will get them together for you. Yay! Don't forget, your library loves you. Be kind, be well, stay healthy, and when you come to see us, make sure that you put on your mask. Have a great day. See you soon.
They might discover connections, but I'm guessing that the people around the president were careful to keep the president himself out of whatever they were planning on January 6th. But I suspect we're likely to see some connection points between those groups that I just referenced, the Proud Boys, the Oath Keepers, that coordination that was happening in the weeks leading up to January 6th. I find it really hard to believe that there wasn't also connection points with people around the president. So I think it's important for us to find out and understand how coordinated this really was. I'm very concerned. I think there are a lot of outstanding questions about why it took so long for the National Guard to respond. I really don't want the story to be that our government was actually, that there were political appointees actually, looking to see if the president could declare martial law if things got out of hand enough. I really don't want that to be the answer, but there's something that is just off about the timeline and the delays, and we need that question answered. And if, in fact, there was a nefariousness to it, not just a bad judgment call, those individuals need to be prosecuted and held accountable. Does all of that reach to the president? I think that's a tougher burden, but it does sound like from some of the stories that we're hearing from both former prosecutors as well as people that know this area of the law, there's at least a case to be made about incitement to violence, about obstructing the peaceful transfer of power. So seeing that the president lied to his followers for weeks, and that by doing so deceived people to the point of believing that it was well within their rights and in some cases their duty to violently attempt to overthrow the election. We really need the truth to come out so that we can start to rebuild and lift that deceit from those that are still believing in it.
So some of the people who stormed the Capitol were members of the Oath Keepers or the 3%ers, which recruit from the military and from the police. And some of the people I'm referring to here were former members of the military or the police. And I'm wondering how much that concerns you. If you see, for instance, the military as a training ground, not only for protecting the country, but also for the people who are accelerationists and want to start a civil war here.
I mean, certainly it's very concerning that we have former military, maybe even current military or current National Guard participating in any extremist group, especially extremist groups that are violent in nature. It's important to understand, though, the way that militias recruit. It's not necessarily obvious that what they're recruiting to is illegal. There's a big misunderstanding out in our public about what a militia is. Militias are referenced in the Second Amendment, so there's this belief that it's legal, that it's constitutionally protected activity. Turns out that's not the case.